Welcome to Chapter 2, Communication Development. The first thing we'll talk about is communicative competence. It's the knowledge and implicit awareness that speakers of a language possess and utilize to communicate effectively in that language. It's more than speaking in grammatically well-formed sentences, or the speaker's skilled navigation of both linguistic and pragmatic elements of language are present. Linguistic aspects of communicative competence include phonological competence, grammatical competence, lexical competence, and discourse competence. Let's take a closer look at those. Phonological competence is the ability to recognize and produce the distinctive, meaningful sounds of a language or phonemes. Phoneme consonant sounds and for English speakers are typically more difficult to pronounce. Infants arrive in the world ready to distinguish among the sound of all language. Children achieve receptive phonological competence within their first year of life. An infant's vocal tract is not a miniature version of the adult vocal tract. In fact, it's very small and the larynx sits high in the throat. Only with development and time does the larynx drop lower to approximate its location in human adults. Phonological processes are a normal phonological deviation that young children make in producing specific sounds and words, and thus are context specific. We'll talk more about phonological processes a little bit later in the chapter in greater detail. Grammatical competence is the ability to effectively recognize and produce the syntactic and morphological structures of a language. For example, using their knowledge of word order, English speakers understand the sentence, "Jim is hitting Bob," to mean that Bob is the recipient of Jim's unwelcome actions, and not the other way around. By around 2 years of age, children have an understanding of the word order that is acceptable in their language. Lexical competence is the ability to recognize and produce the conventional words that the speakers of a language use. Important ages to remember are 6 months. By about 6 months of age, children begin to comprehend words, other words. Okay, let me start over. Sorry about that. By about 6 months of age, children are comprehending words other than just mommy or daddy. They might have understanding of words such as bottle and hug. Then at 12 months of age, children typically produce their first true word. Discourse competence is the ability to relay information to others fluently and coherently. An example of this is my friend Jen once took a trip to the island of Corfu in Greece. While there, she joined her friends in swimming through the dark cave, which they later learned was called the Canal de Mort, because legend says that if a woman swims through it and passes a man swimming in the opposite direction, they will fall in love. So in order to successfully interpret each of the italicized words in the passage, the listener must rely on information given previously in the discourse. The word "there" refers to the island of Corfu, she refers to Jen, they refers to Jen's friends, and so forth. Likewise, the speaker is able to follow the meaning over multiple sentences. Pragmatic aspects of communicative competence include functional competence, sociolinguistic competence, interactional competence, and cultural competence. Functional competence refers to the ability to interpret the social meaning that language conveys and to choose language that is socially appropriate for communicative situations. The basic purposes for communication are to request, to reject, and to comment. In sociolinguistic competence is the ability to interpret the social meaning that language conveys and to choose language that is socially appropriate for communicative situations. The speech register is the variety of speech appropriate to a particular speech situation. For talking with friends and family, informal registers are suitable, such as, "Hey, how's it going?" Whereas conversations with a prospective employer call for a more formal register, such as, "It has been very nice to meet you." This can also be referred to as code switching. When you're in different situations, code switching might be something that you have tried out actually in the past in just your regular general life. Most of us code switch. Interactional competence is the ability to understand and apply implicit rules for interaction in various communication situations. For instance, in Japan, children do not initiate conversation with adults, and people of all ages avoid direct eye contact. That's something typical for that culture. Conversely, in the United States, children frequently initiate conversation with adults, and Americans generally consider eye contact a sign of sincerity or confidence. Cultural competence refers to the ability to function effectively in cultural contexts, both by interpreting behavior correctly and by behaving in a way that would be considered appropriate by the members of the culture. Cultural understandings include attitudes and values and beliefs. The earliest foundations for communicative competence are seen in joint reference and attention, rituals of infancy, caregiver responses, and infant speech perception and categorization. In joint reference and attention, there are developmental phases that characterize infancy: attendance to social partners, emergence and coordination of joint attention, and transition to language. Joint attention leads to intentional communication. You can kind of think of it like this. If someone is holding up a pen in front of a small child's face, that child can communicate without having to say a word. They might look at the pen, then look at the adult, and then look back at the pen as if to say, "Hey, I see that pen. Do you see that pen? We both see that pen." Rituals of infancy. Infants' lives center around routines of feeding or bathing or dressing or sleeping. While dressing a child, parents might talk to them. Although they are too young to understand the words that are being spoken, they will benefit from hearing those words over and over. Phonotactics are the combinations of sounds that are acceptable in their language. For example, English learning infants quickly come to recognize that when they hear ft, as in the word left, the sounds preceding it, l, belong to the same unit, because they never hear ft preceded by a pause. Caregiver responsiveness refers to caregivers' attention and sensitivity to infants' vocalizations and communicative attempts. Key indicators of this are waiting and listening, where parents wait expectantly for initiations. They use a slow pace to allow for initiations, and then they listen to allow the child to complete messages. They also might follow the child's lead. When a child initiates either verbally or non-verbally, parents follow the child's lead by responding verbally to the initiation, using animation, and avoiding vague acknowledgments. Parents might also join in and play. The parents build on their child's focus of interest and play without dominating or saying things like, "Let's go play with the dollhouse," when the child is interested in playing with cars and trucks. Parents might also find that they're being more responsive when they're face-to-face with their child. They can adjust their physical level by sitting on the floor, leaning forward to facilitate face-to-face interaction, and bending toward the child when above the child's level. There are some major communicative milestones in infancy and in toddlerhood. Children achieve certain language and communication milestones at roughly the same age in roughly the same order across the communities of the world. There are, the main developmental periods include the phonation stage, the gooing and cooing stage, the expansion stage, and canonical babbling and variegated babbling stage. The phonation stage occurs between 0 and 1 month, can be up to 4 months. In the phonation stage, infants make cooing and gooing sounds, such as ga. Other things they might be doing, might be making raspberries, clicking noises with their tongues, just kind of exploring the different sounds that their articulators can make. The expansion stage happens somewhere between 4 to 6 months. In our text, it says 3 to 8 months for that stage. It's where they're gaining more control over the articulators and begin to produce isolated vowel sounds, such as E. Infants of this age also experiment with the loudness and pitch of their voices. They might squeal or produce a series of squeals. The canonical babbling, variegating babbling stages, children start putting consonant vowel combinations together, such as ba or ma. Reduplicated babbling consists of repeating those consonant vowel pairs, such as ma, 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 ma. Sometimes this can be misinterpreted by some mothers who are so excited that their child might be saying mama, when the child really is just kind of playing around with consonant vowel sounds. Then comes the emergence of intentionality. Between 7 and 10 months, children have some pre-intentional communication, and then intentional communication is where they become attuned to the referential signals of others and begin to incorporate their own intentional gestures to direct others' attention. And they might cry in a certain way. Sometimes you might hear of a mom saying, "Oh, that's their hungry cry," or "Oh, that's their cry to show me that they're frightened." Then there's a transition to symbolic representations. Words typically are arbitrary symbols, with the exception of some onomatopoeic words like buzz, which sounds a lot like how it's spelled buzz. They don't directly signal the concepts that they represent. Lexical entries are the word's sound, the word's meaning, and the word's part of speech. And then there is the transition from non-symbolic to symbolic representation at about 1 year. The first word is approximately at 12 months. There are 3 components that make up a true word, and those are clear intention and purpose, recognizable pronunciation, and the fact that it's used consistently in context beyond the original context. There are achievements in form of these words. From roughly 1 year to 18 months of age, children acquire an expressive lexicon of about 50 words. They might use single and multi-word utterances. Grammatical morphemes are an inflection that's added to words to indicate the aspects of grammar, such as the plural S, a possessive S, the past tense ed, or the present progressive ing. A mean length of utterance, or MLU for short, refers to the average length of children's sentence units or utterances. Achievements in content. A vocabulary spurt, also known as a word spurt or naming explosion, is a remarkable increase in the rate of vocabulary acquisition. During this spurt, children can learn an average of 7 to 9 words per day. Some parents of toddlers report that their children use new words out of the blue, such as plenty, vent, dangerous, or steep. Underextension is when children apply newly learned words to specific reference other than to a category of reference. For instance, children who have just learned the word doggy might use it only to refer to the family pet instead of all dogs. Then the opposite of that would be overextension, and that's when children use words in a wider set of contexts than adults would consider appropriate. An example of this might be when a child uses the word, learns the word horse, and then they use that word for all four-legged animals. There are different types of achievements in use. Instrumental is to satisfy their own needs, such as, can I play with that next? Regulatory, the directives to others, such as stop pushing me. Personal interaction, where feelings are shared. This is my favorite song. They can request information, ask questions to learn and investigate their world. In heuristic, where did this come from? Then they can tell stories to pretend or use imaginative play. I know how to fly airplanes because I'm a pilot. They can give information to communicate with others, such as, I'm 3. Children during the toddler age are not typically highly skilled in conversation. Conversational skills require being able to initiate a conversational topic, sustain that topic for several turns, and then appropriately conclude the conversation. You can imagine a parent might ask a child, what did you do at school today? And the toddler might say, nap time. And then that's the end of the discussion, where the parent might be looking for kind of, a list of activities or a little bit more information than just the toddler responding nap time. Toddlers might demonstrate some skill in starting a conversation or taking one turn in that conversation, but they cannot typically keep it going for more than 1 or 2 turns. Expressive phonology refers to the observable sound and sound patterns in children when producing syllables and words. When they speak, toddlers tend to use the sounds with which they are most skilled. Underlying every sound or sound pattern that a child produces is a phonological representation, a mental representation of a particular phoneme or sound pattern. Attainment of specific phonemes refers to norm referencing indicating when children tend to produce a sound correctly more often than they mispronounce it or omit it. Like I said earlier, that we would revisit phonological processes later, and here they are. So phonological processes, some of them include final consonant deletion, reduplication, consonant harmony, cluster reduction, and liquid gliding. You go back to the former slide. In final consonant deletion, the final consonant of a word is omitted. A child might say ca for cat. In reduplication, the first syllable in a word is repeated or reduplicated, such as wawa for water or baba for bottle. In consonant harmony, one consonant in a word takes on features of another consonant. A child might say dawdy for doggy. Cluster reduction, a consonant cluster of two or more consonants that occur together, such as stick, is reduced to a single consonant, such as tick. And liquid gliding, the consonants L and R are changed to W and Y, such as wabbit for rabbit. That always brings to mind you wascally wabbit in the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Okay, the next slide is showing achievements in speech and the typical ages where 50% and 90% of children correctly produce each of the sounds that are, or the phonemes that are listed on the left. Achievements in form include grammatical morphemes. As discussed earlier, they're the modifications to words that provide additional grammatical precision, such as pluralizing words. Grammatical morphemes do not really carry any meaning, rather they provide grammatical detail. Derivational morphology refers to the addition of prefixes and suffixes that carry meaning and thus change a word's meaning, and sometimes it's part of speech. For instance, we can add the suffix er to work to change its part of speech from a verb to a noun, worker. Auxiliary or helping verbs, both contractible and contractible, such as I am, oh sorry, skip the one above that, the verb be copula, both uncontractable and contractible. I am Paul being the uncontractible and I'm Paul being the contractible. And the auxiliary or helping verb, both uncontractible and contractible. I am carrying Paul or I'm carrying Paul. There's the subject, verb, object, adverb, such as Daddy's hitting the hammer outside. Then the subject, verb, complement adverb. An example of that is baby is sleepy now. And then the subject, auxiliary, verb, adverb. An example of that is baby is eating now. Children begin embedding phrases and clauses in their sentences to create complex and compound sentences at this time. Lexical development or fast mapping is the initial exposure to a word accompanied by the rapid acquisition of general sense of that word's meaning. So that single exposure is often adequate for giving children a general sense of a novel word's meaning. Curtis describes vocabulary development as a four-stage process. In stage one, a child has no knowledge of a word, as in, I've never heard that before. In stage two, a child has emergent knowledge of a word. I've heard of it, but I don't know what that word really means. In stage three, a child has contextual knowledge of the word. I recognize that in context, it has something to do with whatever that context might be. And then a child has full knowledge of the word. I know what that word is. I can use that word. Decontextualized language aids in understanding through the incorporation of and reliance on shared knowledge, gestures, intonation, and immediately present situational skills. A child using contextualized language might say, "Give me that," while pointing to something in the listener's hands. So there's something in context that's telling them what the that is. A child using decontextualized language might ask a parent for something in another room of the house where there really is no context present, such as, "Can you get the blocks down from my bookshelf?" The parent won't really see the bookshelf. They just have to have knowledge of what that bookshelf is that the child is referencing. Achievements in use. The use describes how we apply language functionally to meet our personal and social needs. This can be done through conversational skills, ability to take turns in a conversation, to maintain that conversation, to present topics or introduce topics in a conversation, to organize information, and use 2 different types of narratives, personal and fictional. In personal narratives, an individual shares a factual event in his or her life, and in a fictional narrative, an individual shares a made-up event. One of the achievements in speech is phoneme mastery. By the end of the preschool period, children are likely to have mastered nearly all of the phonemes in their native language. 4 and 5-year-olds typically exhibit only lingering difficulties with a few of the later developing phonemes, including R as in row, L as in low, S as in sun, Ch as in cheese, Sh as in shy, Z as in zoo, and the hard and soft THs as in think and though. In the preschool years, nearly all processes are suppressed, referring to the phonological process suppression. As children's phonological systems stabilize, these processes are suppressed. Weak syllable deletion and cluster reduction may occur with 4-year-olds, but are usually suppressed by 5 years of age. There are 2 patterns that may persist past the 5th birthday, and those are the liquid gliding, or the the L and R substitution, and the TH substitution. Achievements in emergent literature, or literacy rather, include the earliest period of learning about reading and writing. I've just noticed that it says reading a writing, but it's supposed to say reading and writing on the slide. Print awareness describes the young child's understanding of the form and functions of written language. Children recognize that print is a specific type of stimulus in their environment and in books. You may have heard the term environmental print. A child as young as 2 or 3 might be able to recognize the Golden Arches as McDonald's, if that's one of their favorite places to eat. In my own experience, my oldest child was probably about around 2 or 2.5. His favorite place happened to be Taco Bell, and he would always see the bell on Taco Bell and yell out, "Taco Bell, Taco Bell." That was all great until there was Autobell, which was located close to Taco Bell, and so that became a little bit confusing. Were we going to the car wash, or were we going to eat some tacos? Nonetheless, he was recognizing the bell as environmental print that meant something to him. Phonological awareness is, it describes the child's understanding of a sensitivity to the sound units of oral language, namely the series of larger and smaller units that make up speech, the phonemes and the syllables and the words that make up speech. Functional flexibility is the ability to use language for a variety of communicative purposes or functions. Language functions, school-age children adjust to listener characteristics. This flexibility is increasingly important for school-age children because they start to compare and contrast and persuade and hypothesize, explain and classify and predict in the context of their classroom activities and projects. In doing this, they will have to learn how to adjust to listener characteristics, state advantages as a reason to comply, anticipate and rely to counter arguments, use positive techniques such as politeness and bargaining as strategies to increase compliance, avoid negative strategies such as whining and begging, generate a large number and variety of different arguments, and control the discourse assertively. These are 7 skills that students must have or possess to integrate in order to use language to persuade. Reading and writing. Alphabetic principle is that children must learn the orthography of letters or graphemes that correspond to the phonology of sounds or phonemes. There are 5 stages of learning to read. There's an initial stage of reading or decoding. This typically occurs when children are between 5 and 7 years old. During the period of kindergarten through 1st grade, they begin to decode words by associating letters with corresponding sounds in spoken words. In this phase, when children read, they make word substitution errors in which the substituted word is semantically and syntactically probable. For example, they might read the sentence, "The dog is growling," as "the dog is barking." They might substitute the semantically and syntactically plausible word barking for a word they do not know, growling. Then the next stage is confirmation fluency and ungluing from print. This period covers the ages of 7 and 8, approximately second to 3rd grade. During this stage, children hone their decoding skills learned in the decoding stage, and they experience confirmation as they become more confident in the reading skills that they've gained. As children read familiar text, they become particularly proficient with high-frequency words and use the redundancies of language to gain fluency and speed in their reading. Fluency is reflected by reading that is efficient, well-paced, and free of errors. Ungluing from print refers to the idea that as children become more confident and fluent in their reading abilities, their reading becomes more automatic. You might think of beginning readers who put their finger underneath each word and their reading is very choppy, such as "the cat will chase the dog," as they move their finger along under the words. A little bit later, they may be more confident and read it more fluently as "the cat will chase the dog." Okay, reading for learning the new is the next stage, and this is from grades 4 to 8, typically 9 to 14 years. During this stage, children will read to gain new information. And the next stage is multiple viewpoints in high school, 14 to 18 years. The students will learn to handle increasingly difficult concepts and the texts that describe them. And then the last stage of learning to read is construction and reconstruction, a world view, and that is from age 18 years on. And in this stage, readers read selectively to suit their purposes. In this stage, there are different views on the matter of what they're reading. One of the views seems to have the best evidence supporting it, and so they might tend to go along with that view. The term literate language is used to describe language that is highly decontextualized. Specific features of literate language include elaborated noun phrases, adverbs, conjunctions, metacognitive and metalinguistic verbs. For elaborated and noun phrases, these are groups of words consisting of a noun and one or more modifiers that provide additional information about that noun. Those would be articles, a, an, and the, possessives, my, his, and their, demonstratives, this, that, and those, quantifiers, every, each, some, WH words such as what or which, and adjectives such as tall or long. Then adverbs are syntactic forms used to modify verbs, which enhance the explicitness of action and event descriptions. They provide additional information about time and manner, degree, place, reason, and affirmation or negation. With conjunctions, they're words or phrases that organize information and clarify relationships among elements. Some of the coordinating conjunctions: and, for, or, yet, but, nor, and so. Subordinating conjunctions, there are more of those, and some of those are after, although, as, because. Metacognitive and metalinguistic verbs are verbs referring to various acts of thinking and speaking. Metacognitive verbs include verbs such as think, know, believe. Metalinguistic verbs include verbs such as say, tell, shout. And last but not least, this is the last slide of this chapter, form and content refinements. They are going to require an understanding of multiple meanings, understanding of lexical ambiguity, and understanding of figurative language, form refinements, and content refinements. As far as form refinements, examples of some noun phrases modified would be a tree called the willow. An example of a complex verb phrase: they have driven a long way. As students move through the elementary grades into high school, they achieve refinements in form. Those are some examples of that. Content refinements, there are 3 areas of content development for school-age students: understanding multiple meanings, understanding lexical ambiguity, and understanding figurative language. Lexical ambiguity occurs when words have multiple meanings, such as bear. That was a real bear. Obviously, a simple meaning of that word is the noun bear, as in the animal. When you take that to the next level and say that was a real bear, there needs to be some understanding of the concept, of the context, rather. If you were saying that was a real bear, meaning a real bear versus a teddy bear, obviously would have different meaning than that was a real bear, as in, wow, that was really tough to accomplish. The figurative language includes similes, metaphors, oxymorons, hyperboles, and proverbs. An understanding of those obviously are higher level. Those will be during the adolescent years. So you will need a supportive linguistic environment to facilitate the process of understanding all of these. That concludes the lecture for Chapter 2, Communication Development. Thanks for listening, and good luck on the test on Chapters 1 and 2.